Alright, so Warlock in the Burning Crusade. What specs are viable? What specs are good? Well, if we look back at written guides and videos from way back in the day during original TBC, the large majority of the time, we see Warlocks going Shadow Destruction, where they spam Shadow Bolt and get massive crits, and that is the PvE spec. While sometimes bringing one Affliction Warlock for Malediction talent, making Curse of Elements a little bit better to buff the rest of the casters in the group. Even on private servers, we oftentimes see the large majority of Warlocks in PvE going Shadow Destro once they get their Spell Strike, their 2-piece tier 4, enough hit and crit, they just go Shadow Destro and ride the Shadow Destro wave for the rest of the TBC expansion. Lastly, I even put out a poll on my own YouTube channel a little while after Classic pre-patch came out, and I asked all of you guys, what do you think is the best PvE spec for Warlocks in Phase 1? And lo and behold, even most of you guys voted for Shadow Destruction to be the best PvE spec. But is this truly all Warlocks have to offer in PvE during the Burning Crusade? Is it really just Shadow Destruction with the occasional Affliction Warlock to buff the raid? Alright, before we go any further into the video, let's first break down what these three specs are that most of us have heard about if you've looked into TBC Warlock Raiding. The first of those being the Unstable Affliction PvE build, where you go all the way down in the Affliction tree to pick up Unstable Affliction, and then going the rest of the points into the Destruction tree. The second is going to be the Affliction build, where you don't pick up Unstable Affliction. Instead, you take those couple extra points that you save, and you put them in the Destruction tree to pick up Ruin. This is typically a bit better than the previous build after you have enough critical strike rating to really profit from the Ruin talent. Third, and last but not least, of course, the Shadow Destruction build that we all know and love, going into the Destruction tree to get Shadow and Flame in all of the juicy points before it, and then also dipping into the Demonology tree just far enough to pick up Demonic Sacrifice, just like how we did in Classic, but now we have even more benefits that make our Shadow Bolt hit massively hard. Alright, first things first, let's talk about these two Affliction builds and why you even want to bring an Affliction Warlock to the group anyway, if it's just worse DPS than a Shadow Destro Warlock. Well, as most of you probably already know, one of the main reasons you want to bring an Affliction Warlock is because of this second to last talent point, 3 out of 3 Malediction. This increases the damage bonus effect from your Curse of Elements by 3%, increasing the magic damage taken on the mob that you curse by a lot over the span of your whole raid and all of the magic damage your raid is doing. But that's not the only utility that an Affliction Warlock brings. On top of that, they also bring 5/5 Shadow Embrace. This means that anything that your Affliction Warlock is casting on will leave a debuff on them, reducing the physical damage that they do by 5%. And 5% might seem kind of small, but it really adds up and is really quite good utility. On top of that, they have two little minor things that are pretty nice, one of those being the Suppression talent. Earlier stages of the game, when you're just hitting 70 and you don't quite have full Karazhan gear, anything out of 25 man raids, or anything like that, this will give you free hit rating on your Affliction spells, which really helps out on the earlier stages of the game. And on top of that, just as a niche little thing that this spec has, it also has 2 out of 2 improved Drain Soul. And you might say, Alive, who cares about Drain Soul? It returns mana when you kill something with Drain Soul. Yeah, I know. That part of the talent is really not that good. I'm not disagreeing with you. But now in TBC, it has an additional effect. It says, in addition, your Affliction spells generate 10% less threat. So normally as an Affliction Warlock, you're not really pulling threat off the tank when it comes to a boss. But do you guys know what else is an Affliction spell in the Burning Crusade? Huh? Anyone? That's right, the big seed. Seed of Corruption, the best AoE spell in the whole game. In this spec, even though you might do a little bit less damage than Destro on single target, your Seed of Corruption will generate 10% less threat, which is a small niche thing, but also at the same time, it's really quite nice. Now, you might be asking, when do I go from the Unstable Affliction build over to the Ruin build? And that's something that we're going to touch on in a lot more detail when we get to the simulation part of the video, where I really break down how the damage works for all of the different specs. And we will also touch on that during the best in slot sheet that is coming up in a minute. But all I'm going to say for now is, in TBC, our damage over time effects, unfortunately, do not have a chance to crit. So that means that as the Unstable Affliction build, you're not going to scale well with critical strike rating, especially when compared to the Ruin Affliction build, or even better yet, the Shadow Destruction build. But unfortunately, you don't have a choice of just flat stacking spell power to infinity. So you'll end up getting critical strike rating on your gear no matter what. So eventually, you're going to want to swap over to the Ruin build because of that subsidiary critical strike rating that you're going to eventually pick up. Alright. I know exactly what you guys want. Alive, give me the numbers. How big dick can I go as Affliction? How much DPS am I doing? I gotta know. What am I doing number-wise as Affliction? How much worse is it than Destro? So we're gonna jump straight into the simulations. But before we do, I'm just gonna give a quick shout out to JPaint. If you guys have never heard of JPaint, he is a guy that has been working on simulation spreadsheets for both Classic and TBC and has been doing such an incredible job at it. In the past, when I've played private servers, I've seen so many scuffed spreadsheets that just were missing so many factors. But this spreadsheet literally has it all, you guys. You can account for everything: when you pop Bloodlust, when you're popping a Flame Cap, Blood Fury, what Warlocks in your group, what gear they have, what their critical strike rating is, and it automatically calculates the average ISB uptime. You can also change your gear setup. You can change between multiple setups. You can account for having a boomkin in your group. You can account for literally everything in this spreadsheet, guys. So I'm gonna leave a link to this spreadsheet down in the description below so that all of you can also use this amazing spreadsheet and tinker around with it, because I know I wasted tons of time on this spreadsheet just having a bunch of fun. Another link I'm gonna leave down below is a link to JPaint's PayPal. Now, he is not sponsoring this video. He is not giving me anything for shouting him out whatsoever. However, I feel like he has done so much for the Warlock community in TBC by just producing this spreadsheet. And after talking to him personally, he has put so many hours into this spreadsheet to make sure it's working flawlessly and has all the possible options that you guys could imagine. So if you guys are generous and feel like giving him a tip, I'm going to leave a link to his PayPal down below in the description. You're not obligated to leave him a tip, but it would be more than welcome by him, and I'm going to leave one myself because the man has really pulled through for us, guys. Alright, now let's finally discuss what the single target rotation is like for this build, and it's going to play out almost exactly like you guys would probably imagine, with one small little twist. That being that, yes, you want to keep up Unstable Affliction, yes, you want to keep up Corruption, and obviously your curse assignment as an Affliction Warlock will always be Curse of Elements, so you don't have to worry about Agony or Doom on a single target fight. The thing you guys might not have expected, though, for the Affliction Warlock is it's actually better to keep Immolate rotating as well. And yes, I know you're not in the Destruction tree. You don't have improved Immolate. You don't have Emberstorm. And even some of your gear is Shadow Power gear. But it is still more profitable in Tier 4 Phase 1 BiS to keep Immolate rotating for both the Unstable Affliction build and the non-Unstable Affliction build. Another thing you'll notice is something we touched on earlier. and that is that the Ruin build will slowly outscale the Unstable Affliction build. And as we can see in these sims, in Phase 1 Perfect BiS, the Ruin build already, without any Tier 5 gear, starts to outweigh the Unstable Affliction guild just narrowly. That means that all of those players out there that are planning to play Affliction Warlock, after you've obtained Phase 1 Best in Slot, you will start being able to go to the Ruin build and getting bigger Shadow Bolt crits. Alright, so before I start breaking down this BiS list, I just want to put it out there that for Affliction in particular, it's really going to depend on how your guild is doing things. And the reason I say that is because typically the Affliction Warlock is not going to be in the group with the Elemental Shaman. This means that you're not going to be receiving 3% hit rating and 3% crit rating from their Totem of Wrath, which will change how your BiS list ends up playing out. On top of that, if you're Alliance, you also can pick up the Drain Eye passive and get another 1% hit rating. Will drastically change how you're going to end up gearing your character. But this is a potential BiS list that I have here in front of us. And you'll notice that this BiS list is not hit capped. It is at 14.27% hit rating. And the reason that is because this is the BiS list for Unstable Affliction. And for Unstable Affliction, the large majority of your spells are going to be hit capped because they're Affliction spells and we have points into suppression. The spells that are not going to be hit capped are your filler Shadow Bolts, which, yes, is not that great for a Shadow Bolt to miss, but we're also using Eye of Magtheridon. And as of the recording of this video, no one that I know of, or Crix, or everyone I reached out to, was able to get their hands on this trinket during the TBC Classic Beta, when people were testing Magtheridon. So as of the recording of this video, we don't know the exact precise way that the proc is going to work on this, but after looking back at old TBC videos and reading old TBC content and reading old TBC comments from way back in the day, Eye of Magtheridon has a 100% chance to proc if you get a full resist, which means this also accounts for debuff full resists. So if you apply ISB, Improved Shadow Bolt debuff, and it resists, this will proc. Also, as an Affliction Warlock, you have Shadow's Embrace debuff, which also has a chance to resist, which will proc this. And then on top of that, your filler Shadow Bolts, although having a very, very small percent chance to miss, will also proc this. Although it is also important to note that, at least according to the data that I've seen looking back at how it worked previously in TBC way back in the day, this will not proc off of partial resists from dots or anything else, only full resists. Another important thing to mention about Magtheridon's Eye is for this Unstable Affliction build, if you end up getting a Shadow Bolt resist or any sort of debuff resist and proc this trinket, it then allows you to snapshot that spell power and reapply a whole new round of dots as soon as they expire. However, if you don't like playing around Magtheridon's Eye, you could easily drop out any piece in this list for a little bit more hit rating and easily hit cap yourself out, like we'll see in the next BiS list that we're about to look at for the Aff Destro build. Now, if we're looking to move away from the Unstable Affliction build and we want to go for the Affliction Ruin build that leans heavier into Shadow Bolt, we then change our BiS list to what we see here. And there's only a few different changes here. We pick up Brooch of Unquenchable Fury for a little bit more hit rating, Crimson Bracers of Gloom for a little bit more hit rating, and we swap to Quagmiren's Eye. And the reason is because since we're slightly less reliant on our Affliction spells, aka we're dropping Unstable Affliction, then that means the hit rating for our Shadow Bolt is more necessary. And on top of that, since we're not maintaining Unstable Affliction, we also have more time to be casting Shadow Bolts, which means the benefit of Quagmiren's Eye and the haste from Quagmiren's Eye becomes very, very good. And also, it is important to note that the haste that you get from Quagmiren's Eye also makes your global cooldowns slightly faster as well, which means you'll be able to put up your dots faster. Alright, to wrap up the Affliction portion of this video, I'm going to toss up on the screen now what all of the DPS sims are for the different Affliction builds in a one-on-one boss fight that lasts on average of 3 minutes. In addition to that, I'll also post next to them the stat weights of all of the different stats for this build. Alright boys, finally we can talk about the big dick spec, the pumper spec Shadow Destro. Now, this spec has huge Shadow Bolt crits in TBC. We already had ISB, we already had Shadow Weaving, but now our Curse of Elements is better. We still have Demonic Sacrifice, but now we also have Shadow Inflame, making our spell power gain huge benefits for Shadow Bolt, even more. And then obviously we still have Ruin, just like we did before, making our critical strikes do more damage. But now in TBC on top of that, we have Elemental Shaman putting down Totem of Wrath, giving us 3% hit rating for free, 3% crit rating, totally free. Also now has a totem that gives us even more spell power. And then of course we slap a Boomkin in there as well for another 5% crit. That means through the Elemental Shaman, the Boomkin, and the 5 points in our talent tree and Devastation, we're gaining 13% crit just for free on top of having insanely good spell power scaling. Okay. And that is what people think of when they think of Warlocks in TBC. They think of big dick Shadow Bolts. Now, this would typically be the time where I break down the talent build and tell you guys what cool contributions you can make to the raid and blah blah blah. No. This isn't Affliction, boys. This is Shadow Destro we're talking about. The only utility you're going to be bringing as this Shadow Destro spec is that big fat dick damage. You feel me? You're just coming in there, topping the meters, easy GG, no read. That's it. That's what you're coming in for. Shadow Bolt, bang, bang, bang. I win, you lose, I'm the best, you suck. That's it, boys. Although there is one slightly tiny thing I do need to point out with this build, and that is that this build isn't 100% completely Shadow Bolt. It's actually still good to use Immolate and keep it up in this build, since we end up having those points into Emberstorm and improved Immolate. And then bang, bang, bang with Shadow Bolt. That's it. It gets kind of complex. You have to rotate one dot and bang them out with Shadow Bolt. But that's it. I swear, guys, that's it. And here we have the Shadow Destro Phase 1 Best in Slot. And it's very, very similar to the AF, where we go for 2-piece Spell Strike Hood, 2-piece Tier 4 bonus for another proc that can give us more shadow damage, and then filling out the rest of it with Bracers of Havoc, Blood Maul Magus Blade, Orb of the Soul Eater, and so on and so on. Pretty much the same as the AF build. The only thing that really changes here is you could potentially not go for Ashen's Gift and go for Sparking Arcanite Ring instead. And if you do go for Sparking Arcanite Ring, you swap your wand to Tristful Wand of Ascendancy, giving you 2 less spell power, but 0.1% more crit compared to the other build, and the exact same hit rating. And I know you guys are going to say, Alive, you have 12.92 hit rating. That is not hit cap. Well, remember, we will typically be in group with an Elemental Shaman, giving us 3% more hit, meaning we're only going to be 0.08 off of spell hit cap. And that is such a minute, small chance to miss that it is totally fine leaving it there. But if you truly never want to see a single miss on your screen for any reason, and you were scarred emotionally from Classic WoW and getting a bunch of resists, I totally understand. I've been there, I've done that. I know what you mean, man. It's okay. you can easily swap out one of the gems in your boots or gloves and toss in a small hit rating gem. It'll take you a little bit over cap, but at least you'll be reaching cap. And for all those Alliance players out there, remember, the shaman in your group is going to be Draenei, which means you're going to get another 1% hit rating, allowing you to swap this gear setup a little bit, either dropping Brooch of Unquenchable Fury for something like Adornment of Souls, or dropping the wand for Eridar Wand of Obliteration. You can mess around with the gear depending on what your group has and if you're Alliance or Horde. Alright, so bringing up the sim sheet for this build, we're first going to look at what if we just spammed Shadowbolt. What DPS would we reach if we were only spamming Shadowbolt and doing nothing else? And then, what DPS would we get if we weren't just spamming Shadowbolt, but we were also rotating Immolate? As you can see, these two DPS are actually very, very similar, with just Shadowbolt spam coming out just narrowly ahead. So normally you would think, oh, well, I guess I should just go for spamming Shadowbolt. And that's not necessarily true. It's nice to have this hybrid spec and have the option of rotating Immolate as well, because there's a lot of fights out there like High King Mulgar, like Magtheridon and all of their ads, Moros, and multiple other fights where having the ability to have a strong dot like Immolate rotating on multiple mobs is a nice option to have as opposed to just not having Emberstorm and not having improved Immolate. So even if this sort of hybrid Shadow Destro spec that rotates Immolate is about 8 DPS behind just pure Shadowbolt spam on single target, it's still nice to be able to have that flexibility on hand whenever you need it for any sort of multi-dot or cleave scenario. But once again, I ask myself the question, is this really the best that Warlocks can get in TBC? Before we go any further in the video, guys, I do want to give a shout out to my very, very first sponsor ever on the channel, and that is RestedXP.com. Now, the reason I took this sponsorship is it isn't just some website company, some random people that offered to sponsor my video. No, it's actually Cargos and the boys, you guys. If you haven't heard of Cargos, he is another very, very popular Warlock streamer and YouTube content creator. And he teamed up with people like Tommy Salami, Tactics, Zarant, Seven Leaves, and multiple others that have world records in leveling in several different categories of leveling, and they all joined together to make this website that offers multiple written guides and a downloadable add-on for leveling in TBC. I'm actually even going to be using one of these on stream during my TBC leveling on my Warlock. I'm going to be using the Outland Dungeon Cleave Guide 60 to 70. And Cargos has already showed me this guide and this add-on. And boys, I gotta say, it is actually super clean. It goes step by step, gives you options in-game if you want to do an open world quest, or if you want to just go to a dungeon, exactly how much XP you need to grind in each and every dungeon, multiple different flight paths on your way to leveling up, and get this, guys, it even tells you how to get Kara attuned by the time you're 70. So if you are planning on leveling up in TBC Classic when TBC Classic launches, then this is going to be the add-on you're going to want to get. This add-on will take you from 60 to 70 the fastest possible. And if you use the discount code ALIVE to the link that I'll leave here on the screen and in the description of this video, not only do you get 5% off any purchases that they have on their website, but you're helping out Cargos and the boys and helping out my channel at the same time. Okay, back to the Warlock goodness.
You're going to love this. Trust me, what you're seeing now is my normal state.
Fire's coming in hot as a new spec topping the charts for Warlocks in TBC. Okay, well, maybe it's not completely a new spec, and maybe this is only kind of breaking the meta for a few of you out there. If you've really done your homework in TBC for Warlocks and really looked around, you may have noticed that quite a few people have already touched on this subject and noticed that fire is actually a really good spec for Warlock in TBC. But still, what the vast majority of players don't know is that it's actually better than Shadow Destro is in a single target boss fight in Phase 1. We'll go into exactly how much better later on to the video when we cover the sims for this spec, but for now, let's talk about the changes in talents and explain the differences in talents compared to the Shadow build. As you guys may have noticed, there's honestly really not that much different. In the beginning of the tree, instead of having improved Shadow Bolt, we get Cataclysm, which helps a little bit with our mana management, but only just slightly. Also, later down into the tree, we actually pick up Conflagurate, which is another instant cast spell that we can use on the move as we're performing any sort of mechanic in any sort of boss scenario where we need to reposition or move to get out of any sort of damaging effect. But aside from that, it's basically just the exact same thing as the Shadow Destro build, going down into Shadow and Flame, and also dipping down into Demonic Sacrifice to have as much damage amplification on your primary casting spell, which in this case is going to be Incinerate. Something that is a bit different with this spec compared to the Shadow spec, though, is you start to unlock a brand new consumable that really helps out a lot, and that consumable is called Flame Cap. This is an herb that you can pick in Zangarmarsh that buffs your fire spell damage by a whopping 80. And I'm not talking about a few seconds like Destruction and Haste Potions do. It buffs you for 80 for a whole minute, which is absolutely massive. Not only do you have a fire-specific consumable, but there is also a crafted fire-specific cloth set that you can wear that's really actually quite good in Phase 1 of TBC Classic, that is going to make it to the best in slot sheet for Fire Warlock in Phase 1, which we'll talk about in just a second, but I know there's something that's on all of your minds right now, and that is Alive. In this build, you're not picking up improved Shadow Bolt, and you're going to hurt the other Warlocks. Well, not really. If all of your Destruction Warlocks are going this build, then you don't really hurt the other Warlocks. The only people that you're hurting are your Shadow Priest and your Affliction Warlock. So really, the only thing Fire needs to do is outweigh the damage that you lose from giving ISB uptime to the Shadow Priest and the Affliction Warlock. And here we have the Phase 1 best in slot for this Fire Destro build. And this setup is going to end us off at 1138 fire spell power, which is a massive amount of spell power. And on top of that, we get a clean 13.00, right hitting the nail on the head perfectly, getting the exact clean 13% hit rating. Couldn't really ask for more there. And on top of that, 21% crit rating, not including Boomkin, not including Elemental Shaman or anything like that, which is also a huge amount of crit rating. And the reason we have so much crit rating and spell power is in part because of the Spellfire robe setup that we have. This is the 3-piece tailoring set for Firecasters, giving you a static 7% spell damage equal to your total intellect. Really boosting up your spell damage. And on top of that, if you notice on all 3 of these pieces here, it also gives just a huge base amount of fire damage on every single piece. However, the drawback is none of these pieces have any hit rating on them. So we have to make up with the hit rating elsewhere, getting things like Spell Strike, which we're going to get anyway. It's just a really good 2-piece bonus, giving us hit rating there, gemming for a bunch of hit rating by going for the orange gems that have the spell power and hit rating, and going for Void Heart Mantle, which also has hit rating, and a cape that also has hit rating. There is one unfortunate thing in this build, and that is that we're going for that Void Heart Mantle, but sadly we can't utilize the 2-piece bonus for the proc on damage. And yes, the 2-piece bonus is very good, but this spec and build ends up opting for the static raw damage that the Spellfire set gives rather than relying on yet another proc. With this specific best in slot sheet, over the course of a 3-minute fight as Fire Spec, using the rotation of just keeping up Immolate and spamming Incinerate, and that's it, this spec averages 2,461 DPS over a 3-minute fight. This is approximately 100 more DPS than the Shadow build, and 100 more DPS is nothing to laugh at. That is quite a lot of damage for a fight that can last 3+ minutes. Especially if you have all 3 of your Destruction Warlocks in the group with the Elemental Shaman and the Boomkin running this spec. How much is our ISB uptime affected by this though, if all 3 of our Destro Warlocks are committed to playing fire? Well, let's take a look. Here we have a 4 Warlock setup. One that is Shadowbolt, Corruption, Siphon Life, Immolate, aka a Affliction, Ruin Warlock. And then we have 3 Destro Warlocks only using Incinerate and Immolate. Now if we go back to the stats and talent page, we can update this and see that we have approximately 44.6% uptime on ISB. Now, if we swap all of the Warlock specs back to the Shadowbolt Immolate Shadow Destro hybrid build, and then calculate our average ISB uptime as the Shadow Destro build, we have 0.79, so 79.2% uptime of ISB on average. So you have a little bit under double the ISB uptime. So that means that if all 3 of your Destro Warlocks are going fire, you lose on average 37% ISB uptime, but you gain on average about 300 or so more raid DPS output single target. And then if you get even faster kill times than a 3-minute kill time, then Fire will pull generally slightly more ahead of Shadow, since the usage of Flame Cap, that 1-minute usage window, will become a larger percentage of the kill window as a whole. Alright, I know everyone's going to ask this. Alive, how well does Fire really do if my mages don't want to go fire and give us improved Scorch? What if my mages are assholes and they just want to go arcane all the time and they never want to go fire? Well, let's see exactly how much DPS the Fire Spec's going to do if we don't have Scorch. So with Scorch turned off, as the Fire Destro build using Incinerate and Immolate over the course of a 3-minute fight, we will do about 2202 DPS, making us slightly worse than a Shadow Destro Warlock. However, I truly don't believe that for most guilds, your mages are going to be able to pull off Arcane. Typically, mages wait until Tier 5 gear when they get their Tier 5 set bonus along with their mage class trinket to go Arcane. But if you're in a super high-end speedrunning guild, maybe possibly we could see a few mages pull off Arcane. But for the general populace, I don't see mages going Arcane being a thing in Phase 1. Alright, so here's a tier list of all the different specs that we covered for Warlocks in Phase 1. As you can see at the very top we see... Wait, hold on. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. What is that? What is that? What is that? No, I know what you're thinking. Alive, I haven't even heard of Demo being good. I even played TBC private servers back in the day, and I never saw people rate as Demonology. Well, the way Demonology works in TBC Classic, and the way that it worked on TBC private servers, is quite a bit different. So, let's start with that. The first thing I want to mention about the Felguard and how it's different on TBC Classic compared to TBC private servers is how the in-combat and out-of-combat passive mana regeneration works for your Felguard. As we can see in this clip here on a TBC private server, it seems that the in-combat passive mana regen is about 9 mana per tick for the Felguard. However, when he exits combat, the passive mana regeneration goes up to about 25 mana per tick. Now let's look at what this passive mana regen looks like on TBC Classic servers. So in this second clip on the TBC Classic server, we can see that the passive mana generation in combat is much, much higher than what it was on the TBC private server, coming out to about 91 mana per tick in combat. And out of combat, the mana generation goes up to 195. This means that your Felguard is going to run far, far less often, and is going to be way less reliant on you casting Life Tap to give it mana through the 1 out of 3 mana feed talent in the Demonology tree. The next difference we're going to look at for the Felguard between TBC Classic and what we saw in private servers is the glancing blows. And it seemed like on private servers, Felguard would receive slightly more glancing blows. But the really, really big deal here, and what really changes Demonology and the Felguard's damage compared to private servers, is the amount of damage that the Felguard's auto attack did when it did have a glancing blow. On TBC private servers, as we can see in the clip behind me, on average, when the Felguard received a glancing blow, it would do about 15 to 18% of its normal standard damage that it would have done if it didn't receive a glancing blow. That means 85 to 82% of the auto attack damage that it would have done is completely negated. Now this next clip is of the Felguard on TBC Classic. When the Felguard does receive a glancing blow, it still does way more damage than what it did on the TBC private server. On TBC Classic, when the Felguard receives a glancing blow, it's approximately between 30 to 25% damage mitigated instead of 83 to 85% damage like we saw on the TBC private server. Meaning the glancing blows on TBC Classic not only happen slightly less often, but when they do happen, they're going to do way more damage than what we saw on the TBC private server. And let's remember that Felguard's attack damage scales up. The more armor penetration debuffs you have on the boss, the more damage Felguard's going to do. The more AP buffs that Felguard has, the more damage it's going to do. If you have a hunter giving exposed weakness on the boss, the more spell power you have. If you pop an orc racial, all of this is going to increase your Felguard's damage. So if you look at how the glancing blows work as you scale up with more and more buffs to your Felguard, the damage differential from how it interacts on TBC Classic and on TBC private servers is going to grow in difference. For example, let's say we buffed our Felguard enough that he does 600 damage on average with a non-crit auto attack. That means that approximately if he were to glancing blow on the private server, he would hit for 90 damage. And then assuming the same auto attack on TBC Classic, if he were to have a 600 damage auto attack and it were to receive a glancing blow, it would do around 430 damage or so. Alright, let's finally break down the talent build, and I'll point out to you guys some really unique things about this build. To get the obvious ones out of the way though, we have Master Demonologist with the Felguard, increasing all damage we do and the Felguard does by 5%. And on top of that, we will gain 35 all resist at level 70, as well as our Felguard gaining 35 all resist. And then of course we have Soul Link, which was slightly changed compared to the classic WoW version. This one gives 20% damage mitigation, and now gives you 5% more damage for you and your Felguard. So between Master Demonologist and Soul Link, you're gaining 10% damage for you, and 10% damage for your Felguard. Next is going to be the talent that I just previously mentioned when we were talking about the difference in mana regen, and that is Mana Feed. This is the talent that you're going to go to help supplement your Felguard's mana pool. Every time you life tap, drain mana, or gain mana through either of those effects, your Felguard is going to gain 33% of it. And with the mana regen that the Felguard has on TBC Classic, just 1 point in mana feed is going to be plenty enough to keep him from going Second to last, we're going to look at Demonic Tactics. This increases the melee and spell critical strike chance for you and your summoned demon by 5%. And this is nothing to laugh at, because as a Destro Warlock, you have Devastation, although the difference between these two talents is Devastation only affects your destruction spells, and Seed of Corruption, the best AoE spell that we have that can crit, isn't affected by Devastation because it is not a destruction spell. It is actually an Affliction spell. So even though Devastation does not give this crit rating to Seed of Corruption, Demonic Tactics will, and that is something that the Destro builds do not have. So that's a little bit of a bonus for the Felguard build when it comes to Seed of Corruption. On top of that, we have probably one of the best talents in the whole tree, and that is Demonic Knowledge. This increases your spell damage by an amount equal to 12% of your total active demon stamina plus intellect. Now, let's talk about how much spell power this is going to give you, because you can get buffed with stamina and intellect buffs like Arcane Intellect, Gift of the Wild giving you a little bit of stats. You can get Power Ward Fortitude. Blessing of Kings pushes that even further. And your pet in TBC will now scale off of the amount of stamina and intellect you have. So the more stamina and intellect you have, the more your Felguard is going to have as well. Which means stamina and intellect for Demonology will end up giving you more and more spell power. And it doesn't even end there. You can also put Blessing of Kings, Mark of the Wild, Power Ward Fortitude, Arcane Intellect, all of these different buffs on your demon as well, giving him even more stamina and intellect, and also giving you more spell power through Demonic Knowledge. So this Demonic Knowledge talent ends up giving you tons and tons of spell power, which means not only will your dots hurt, but let's remember that spell power also makes our Felguard's auto attack and cleave stronger, because the more spell power you have, the more AP he gets. And on top of that, not only does it make our Felguard and our Corruption and our Immolates better and our Shadow Bolts better, but again, our Seed of Corruptions are going to pump, because with Seed of Corruption we have increased critical strike chance with Demonic Tactics, and we're gaining flat % damage increase through Master Demonologist and the Soul Link buff. So we're going to have absolutely massive Seed of Corruption, and Seed of Corruption isn't the only AoE damage that we're going to be able to do, because with this build, obviously we have the Felguard as well, and Felguard has Cleave. So not only will this build have absolutely huge Seed of Corruptions, but you're also going to be able to send in your Felguard to get big 3-man cleaves on top of the big seeds. Everything about this spec is big, boys. We going full big. Now, the last thing I want to mention in this spec is the 1 point into improved corruption. And in this build, your DPS rotation is going to be keep up Immolate, keep up Corruption, spam Shadow Bolt. And with this 1 out of 5 point into improved corruption, yes, you won't be able to cast corruption while moving, but you'll get your corruption cast time close enough to the GCD that it's essentially casting it for free with very little penalty. You could technically get it slightly under the GCD by putting 2 points in, but you would have to take 1 point out of intensity. And intensity is really quite nice, because anything that would normally cause any sort of spell pushback on your Shadow Bolt or anything that you're casting, this will give you a chance to resist that pushback on your spell. But again, if you're doing a raid where you don't have any mechanics that are giving you pushback, or very few mechanics that are giving you pushback, you could potentially drop 1 point of intensity and put 2 points into improved corruption if you so chose. There are a few more hidden gems with this spec as well. Since you're gaining so much spell power from the Demonic Knowledge talent, your Curse of Dooms are going to pop for absolutely massive damage. And on top of that, Felguard build is the exact perfect build to be using your Black Wing Layer trinket and pre-popping that black book before a boss fight and then swapping it back to whatever trinket you want, giving you essentially free Felguard damage with little to no downside at all. On top of that, as most of you may know, Warlocks are oftentimes threat capped in TBC when they're doing Shadow Destro and Fire Destro, because you get massive crits and all of the damage you do goes towards your own personal threat table. But as Demonology, your Felguard can do anywhere between 20 and 28% of your damage profile on a single target boss fight. And the Felguard has his own threat table. That means 20 to 28 of the damage that you do on a boss isn't even contributing towards your own threat, lowering the amount of threat that Warlocks are going to do. That means that not only does this spec do less threat overall, but it also has great single target DPS, great cleave DPS, and amazing AoE DPS because of the huge Seed of Corruptions. Also, one of the drawbacks that we saw earlier in Fire is that Fire doesn't contribute to improved Shadowbolt uptime, meaning you're hurting the Affliction Warlock's DPS and the Shadow Priest's DPS. But this build as Demonology, your primary focus is casting Shadowbolt while maintaining 2 dots. So you're not harming your Shadow Priest or your Affliction Warlock by going this build because you're going to be applying ISB. Not only that, but this build actually has a little bit extra critical strike rating because not only do you have the 5% crit in the destruction tree by picking up Devastation, but now you also have 5% crit from the Demonic Tactics talent. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. Alive, you just said it does great single target damage, but how good is great? Is it really that great? It's not as good as Destro in single target though, right? Wrong. Here in this Demonology sim that we ran, we can see that with the rotation of Shadowbolt, Immolate, Corruption, while maintaining a Curse of Doom, we can get up to 2,473 DPS, which is near the same DPS as the Fire build. However, we're now helping with improved Shadowbolt as well. And on top of that, we have stronger AoE, because as the Fire build, we're mostly focused around fire damage, and Seed of Corruption is shadow damage. As this Demonology build, we have just flat spell power. We're not focused on fire damage or shadow damage, since we're not going Demonic Sacrifice. Meaning this build has about the same DPS single target, but helps your Affliction Warlock, helps your Shadow Priest, and has better cleave damage, and has better AoE seed damage as well. Now, another thing you'll notice here is in this sim, we are counting no Battle Shout on our pet, no Grace of Air Totem, no Unleashed Rage from an Enhancement Shaman, no Hunter buffs such as Ferocious Inspiration or True Shot Aura. We are assuming that this build of Demonology is going to be in group with an Elemental Shaman and with a Boomkin Druid. So what kind of gear setup do we actually wear as Demo to be able to do as much single target damage as Fire Destro? Is it just the same thing? Spell Strike, all that good stuff? Wrong. Yup, I said it. No Spell Strike. You can go and do all of this damage, single target damage, cleave damage, and AoE damage, and you don't even have to waste tens of thousands of gold that you've been saving since Classic WoW to go Spell Strike. In fact, the only tailoring item we even have here is Frozen Shadowweave Boots, and you don't even have to go Frozen Shadowweave Boots either. You can go for Boots of Foretelling instead if you don't want to go for Shadowweave Boots and you only lose a tiny bit of damage, which means in this build, you don't have to go tailoring at all. Another odd thing that you can see here is, yeah, we're not going for Spell Strike, which is already weird enough, but actually, we're going for 4-piece Void Heart, and that's because we're utilizing both Immolate and Corruption to get both effects of the 4-piece bonus. And since we're rotating Immolate and Corruption with the 4-piece set, this allows us to get many more Shadow Bolts off on average over the course of boss fights. And on top of that, it also enables us to be able to use Meta Socket. And we don't have Chaotic Skyfire Diamond in Phase 1, but what we do have is the Mystical Diamond, the chance to increase our spellcasting speed. The other builds that include Spell Strike don't have the option of going this, but this build does, and this, along with Quagmire's Eye, mean that you have the potential to pump out Shadow Bolts at a pretty fast rate, even without drums or Bloodlust. Now, to enable this meta gem, it's actually got a little bit weird of a requirement, and the requirement is that you need to have more blue gems in your socketed gear than you have yellow gems. And if we look around all of our different gem sockets, you see that we have a 1-to-1 ratio. We have 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 yellow, 1 blue, 1 yellow, 1 blue. So we're exactly even. The one that sets us apart is the one in the Void Heart Crown. We put a blue in there, giving us stamina and spell power and a tiny bit of hit rating. But I'd like to remind you guys that all of this slightly increased stamina also slightly increases our spell power because it gives our Felguard a little bit more stamina and giving us spell power through the Demonic Knowledge talent. Also with this gear setup, you can see we're at a crispy, exact 13.00 spell hit. Exactly where we want to be. Couldn't really ask for more there. Now, touching on the subject of Demonic Knowledge, Stamina, Intellect, and all that good stuff, another thing I'd like to point out here is you'll see that we have 1086 shadow damage. And compared to the fire build or the shadow build, you could say, oh, this really isn't that much. But in 70 upgrades, this isn't actually accounting for demonic knowledge. And in this build, we have 575 stamina, a whopping amount of stamina. And on top of that, we have 398 intellect. And that's without Blessing of Kings giving us a % increase on our stats. So with this much stamina and intellect, plus with Power Ward Fortitude and Kings, we're going to see a huge jump in our spell power when Demonic Knowledge is applied. Actually, if you were to compare this to the Fire Destruction Best in Slot sheet, this build has 232 more stamina and 32 more intellect. So you're going to be way beefier in this spec, especially after you get percentage increases such as Blessing of Kings. On top of that, this spec also has Soul Link to mitigate some damage even further. And lastly, let's not forget Master Demonologist, which is then also giving us 35 all resistance too. Now going back to the whole Spell Strike topic, this isn't to say that Spell Strike is necessarily bad for this build. If you get a Spell Strike proc, that spell power slightly increases the AP of your Felguard, which is not a bad thing. The thing that is odd about Spell Strike, though, is when it does proc, it only procs for 10 seconds, which can be a little bit clunky with this build. If you're rotating both Immolate and Corruption, and both of these two dots are not instant casts, then what happens if your Spell Strike were to proc one Shadow Bolt after you've refreshed your two dots? Does that mean that you want to clip your dots and refresh new ones that are snapshotted with the Spell Strike set? Not really. And also, Corruption lasts 18 seconds, so it's not like you can really wait till your Corruption falls off and then use the Spell Strike proc to put it back up as well, because Corruption lasts 18 seconds and Spell Strike proc lasts 10 seconds. So while Spell Strike isn't necessarily bad for this build, the timing of the proc can either be really quite good or really not that great at all. And that's why we end up going for the 4-piece, because the 4-piece will always be effective, gaining benefit on both single target and multi-dotting fights. And on top of that, not only is the 4-piece good, allowing us to get more shadow bolts off in multi-target and single-target fights, but you also gain tons more stamina and intellect from wearing the tier pieces. And that stamina and intellect not only increases our survivability, but also slightly gives us more spell power, and that spell power, in turn, also gives our Felguard more attack power. Not to mention that the stamina and intellect we're getting from the tier pieces also makes our Felboy more beefy too. Big, beefy, thick boy. Alright, finally, I'm going to put up on the screen the simulated single-target DPS over a 3-minute fight for all of the specs that we mentioned today in this video. And on top of that, I'll add on the side of the simulated single-target DPS the relative stat weights for each of the specs as well. Alright guys, to end the video, we're going to leave off with a warning. I know Demonology seems super fun and a lot of people are going to want to try it. And I've been playing it on beta, and it is really fun to play. I enjoy it a lot. However, it is not very noob friendly. You're going to have to ask your healers during the raid, hey, don't forget to buff my pet in addition to me. The pet needs Blessing of Might, the pet needs Blessing of Kings, Power Word, Fortitude, Gift of the Wild, Scrolls of Strength, Scrolls of Agility if you really want, and all that good stuff. Also, if you're new to TBC and don't really know the raid encounters all that well, this will also be a punishing factor to you because you need to be able to know what is dangerous for my pet and could potentially kill it, and what is not dangerous for my pet and potentially kill it. Because even if your pet dies mid-combat, yes, you could instantly summon another one with Fel Domination, but it will not be as good as the previous one because the previous one was fully buffed, and your new one will not be fully buffed. And I know, as well as you know, that your raid is not going to fully buff your Felguard mid-combat if it dies. So, if you're new to TBC or new to playing Warlock in general, I would not recommend Demonology until you feel comfortable with the raids and comfortable with your class. If you aren't feeling comfortable with your raids and class, then just go one of the two Destro builds mentioned earlier in the video.